Can anyone hear us?
Oh, have you started recording?
I think so.
Okay, then.
Welcome to Everyday Nothing, a podcast about nothing in particular. From culture to science to lifestyle, everything goes.
Everything. Okay. I was reading a post on social media today on wokeness.
Okay.
There are a lot of views coming to surface these days. I don't know how to consume these bits of information. Some of them are out of context. Some of them, I think, pretty good researched pieces, but I'm still in two minds about reading anything about it because I feel like we are trying to analyze a process while we are inside it. Like we are in the storm and we are trying to make sense of it because it's still going on, right? The
What is
woke
wokeness?
movement. Yeah, they're talking about how wokeness is dying a slow death because it's actually pseudo intellectual. It's not as much a social revolution that many of us are thinking about. It made me actually
Did we think
wonder.
about did we
Yeah.
think about wokeness as a social revolution, or was it just a name that people who disagreed with it gave it?
That's actually interesting. I was I was thinking in the same way actually. Uh, Wokeness, the term I think was given by others, not the people who
Our
were.
woke.
Yeah, but the argument they're trying to make here is people who are standing against something are actually reinforcing it unconsciously. Like, for example, people who are fighting against racism, are actually reinforcing it or something like that. It made me think, what are they trying to explain? Anyway, this is quite a heavy topic to
That's
start the
interesting.
podcast with.
No, but it's interesting because I think it works on the assumption that talking about something reinforces it, which is the same argument that people make about misinformation as well. And I think in a lot of ways, misinformation, racism, and all of those things, they're really all tied together in the fact that they grew and exploded in the era of social media.
Yeah.
Specifically, when you're talking about misinformation, what they normally say is that when you're trying to correct someone, when you're trying to tell them, look, it's not this, it's actually this way, you are repeating the incorrect stuff and therefore reinforcing that ideology. Now, the way you're describing it, I find it interesting because it's the same thing here, or at least they claim it's the same thing here with racism, where you're trying to stand against it, bring it into the discussion, and somehow that's reinforcing the idea.
Yeah, the
But
same thing
what's your
when
alternative?
they said, I am colorblind. Like, you shouldn't be colorblind. You should see my color and acknowledge it. So, some of the anti racism ideologies or concepts became, I think, I don't know, they lost their function, they lost their intention. I don't know. So, yeah, I was talking about this and how wokeness became more political in nature instead of social, of
Okay.
course.
But in some level, you can argue that it's always been that way because what was the precursor to what we now call wokeness? I think it was simply the idea of progressives.
Yeah.
And someone at some point branded it as if it was a movement that was
Left
backed by,
leaning something.
yeah, left
Yeah.
leaning, but then, like a movement that was backed by someone who just woke up and had this epiphany that we have to progress. But that was never really the case. That's an incorrect
That makes
description
sense.
of
Yeah.
the whole situation, because progressives, you can trace them back to the 1970s, so you can go back to the 1800s and they were progressives. So it's not like an epiphany that society had where racism is bad. No.
Makes sense.
So yeah, so I think if wokeness as a word dies a slow death, I have nothing against it.
Wow. I think, yeah. It's much more than that word. It stands for so many things.
True.
The movement.
True.
We are looking at a social movement rather than a restricted word that just floats around in social media and just stands for something to achieve a moral high ground. Looking down upon people, shaming them is not something that
No, that
a
was never the
movement
idea.
should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the word has been misunderstood and misconstrued, and now I just hope it just doesn't turn into something that people have worked on for so long. It shouldn't stand against it. I just hope
Yeah.
there
It's
is
like
more understanding.
yeah, it's like it's like that Batman films or even the comics, the person, the word, the name, the label doesn't matter who bears it. The idea of it will live long. So I think it is something like that, and I hope that it continues that way, because we need such perspectives in order to shape society into becoming better than it was before.
Yeah, that term or not, I think this revolution is here to stay
For
and
sure.
change the way things have been for so long, especially for marginalized and,
Mm-hmm.
people who are underrepresented.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that was quite a heavy start to this episode, and I hope that hasn't turned anyone off. But then sometimes we need to have these discussions.
Yeah,
It's
they're
not about
important.
whether we like it or not, so much as whether we have made the time and space to have such discussions, and I think it's important that way. But maybe we should switch to something a little lighthearted now.
Like, what are your suggestions?
It's not a suggestion, I have a very specific thing in mind.
Uh-huh.
We've been watching Derry Girls,
Yeah, yes, yes.
which is this really fun
Who suggested?
show.
I wonder who suggested that
I have
to you?
no idea.
I did.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. And I'm enjoying it. It's a show from 2018, isn't it?
Lisa McGee has created.
Yeah, she's a showrunner, and it's about these five girls and one bloke, one English bloke, 5 Irish girls, and I think that alone is going to sell the show. But
I consider James as a Derry girl, and I think he
Yeah.
agrees to it, and everybody also
we're all
agrees to
Derry
it.
girls.
Yeah.
It's a very
What,
nice
what
show.
about it do you like?
Yeah, I like the fact that it's unapologetic. It's just itself. It doesn't conform too much to certain ideologies, and it allows the characters to actually be completely biased towards who they are, which I like in a show because it's more realistic.
Honest.
Honest.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of these shows that are ticking so many boxes that you have all characters, good or evil, being perfectly socially acceptable, which is really weird because that's not how people are.
Yeah.
And a show like
Black
Derry
and white
Girls,
is never
exactly.
reality. Yeah.
So a show like Derry Girls, where you can completely agree with one of the characters on something they say, and then a few moments later they have another viewpoint which you don't agree with, But
Yeah.
then you realize it might not be socially correct either, as in a lot of cases we've seen in the show. But isn't that how life is? And then maybe you learn from that, and then you change and you grow, and maybe it's just a television show. But
I get it. I just had a meta moment when I said black and white is never the case. When I say never, it is another absolutism. And
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from. And the good, the bad, and ugly, every part is given importance in this show, and how they are unapologetic about who they are and what they stand for. And the story is not just about the girls, it's about the time they were growing up in, the
it's set in the
social,
90s.
yeah,
Yeah.
the social context and economic context, the political time, political context at that time. So yeah, it speaks to me at so many levels, and it is relevant for many who've been through similar situations as well. What do you think?
Um, hmm. I don't know if I connect with the show in the sense that something like that happened to me or that I was in that kind of a situation before. I just connect to it on an what's the word? Impersonal level.
Oh, okay.
It's a show and I enjoy it and I enjoy the characters. I don't view myself as in whole or part any of the characters. That's all. That's great too.
Yeah.
I enjoy that as well.
Yeah, that's one way. Yeah. When I was saying, I see myself in a few situations, what I meant was usually how teenagers are portrayed in
Yeah.
series or movies is that there's just rebellion and pointless, meaningless revenge and feeling too much
For the
sort of
sake
a
of
way
it.
for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And here I feel like they have not sugar coated it. However, they've made effort in bringing out some of the shadows of things that we hide from, that we want to keep dormant. I think that stands out. And I see myself as a teenager who feels strongly, who feels that anything is possible, you can do anything, achieve anything. Yeah. Amidst so much of turmoil that they are in, not just personal turmoil, like they have to flee to a different city to be safer. You will see a lot of Irish revolution or invasion being focused in some episodes, but not for the sake of it. It fits well, the way the narrative is going. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't watched all the episodes. In fact, I think I'm in episode 5 or 6 now. I just started watching, but I think you've watched
Yeah,
everything.
I have watched
But
all three seasons.
even in what I have watched, I do recognize the point you're trying to make in that episode where the Ukrainians come in.
Yes.
And then you have this exchange where, on the one hand, you have the show openly critiquing what you might call first world problems versus what are real problems from somewhere
Yeah.
else. But then again, is it real? Is it problems are problems? And for the people who are in those problems, those are the greatest problems in the world.
Yeah.
And I think the show does a really good job of balancing the humor and acknowledging the fact that everyone's problems are their own problems. And maybe no one can fully appreciate the extent to which these problems exist. Because
Right.
you have the Irish, let's say, the militants, etc., roaming around the streets and whatnot. And
There's a religious perspective to that as well.
and a
Yeah.
religious perspective as well. And you've got the Ukrainians coming in, and they're talking about Chernobyl and whatnot. And now, if you were to consider the very same Ukrainians, they would probably be coming for a completely different reason, unfortunately. But then you have this element where the locals who are supposed to be the stars of the show, and generally you would think, well, they're perfect, but they're not. They're so flawed because they're sitting there.
I think
they're
they're
looking
more than being stars. They are characters.
the characters.
Yeah.
They're flawed characters.
Flawed
And,
characters.
yeah, they're sitting there and they're looking
Real
at
to
the
life.
Ukrainian person, and they're talking about that person as if there's some sort of a caricature of everything they know that's Ukrainian, or of some
Do Ukrainians have TV?
yes, that sort of thing. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I think I'd like to pick up on this teenage and adolescent feelings and challenges that they go through. Long back, I had also watched another movie called Chemical Hearts,
Okay.
and that inspired me to work with teenagers as well. Their ability to feel so deeply about everything, their ability to be so passionate about things they believe in. If we can channel that energy, if we can show them a way to channel that energy, I think great things are possible with that potential. I don't remember exactly what stood out in that movie, but I really liked it. It was an offbeat movie. It was also a character sketch of two adolescents trying to understand the world and make meaning out of it. But yeah.
That's interesting because, as you said, they feel so deeply. I think in a way that even kids do, compared to adults. And what really happens? I've always seen this as some sort of numbing effect that reality has. So as the more reality sets in, the more it sort of hammers this thing into you that you can't dream. You can't. That's too much. You need to tone it down. Sort of go baby steps, so to speak.
Yeah.
But when you're a kid and this reality hasn't got to you yet, it hasn't drilled itself into you and numbed you down and brushed you over like an old nail, you still think everything's possible.
Yeah.
And I think the more society becomes better, whether in terms of wokeness that we were talking about earlier or anything else really. A great way of measuring this is to see how much of that childlike or teenage sort of deep-seated belief in things, belief in possibilities pervades into adult life.
Yes. I think we were discussing about this a few months back, about how it takes a village to raise a child and how adults are expected to be on their own, and why the transition period, that is the adolescence, is never been addressed other than just highlighting the struggles, the challenges that, not the struggles and challenges, mostly how difficult teenagers is being highlighted, how they are full of pumped with hormones and they just have misplaced energy is what is popular topic of discussion. But I think that period is very important, and it takes society to raise an adolescent, I think. And most of the problems that they struggle with are systemic, be it sexual education being inaccessible, or society not being open to conversations about mental health, or nobody to turn to about their confusions and identity issues. So it makes sense why they become so rebellious at some point, and they form their own group of people whom they can rely on, and friendship becomes so important for them at that age. And and how it impacts their growth. If we can hold space for adolescence during that time, I think transition to adulthood is going to be much smoother, and there'll be more, for lack of a better word, more responsible adults. And You will not have these many people facing burnouts and, crisis in their adulthood if we can manage
Yeah.
adolescence. What do you think?
It's a complicated issue about which I know very little. Um,
How were you as
But-
an adolescent?
I don't know.
You don't remember?
I don't remember.
I remember every single detail from my adolescent life.
I don't. I mean, I have a vague memory, but I really don't
What stands
recall
out?
being too different from the way I am now.
Did you just skip the
Because
step?
yeah, maybe because I don't recall being. I don't always connect. I have, by observation, I can tell you that I have seen adolescents, teenagers having all of these struggling with certain things, but I don't have any experience with it for whatever reason. I'm not saying that it's a case of being better or worse one way or another. It's just that I don't. But and I've always recognized it through external reading. For example, I've read about how people are like this at that particular age, and then I've happened to observe that. But I don't have any memory of actually having lived through something like that.
Like I said, I have vivid memories of my teenage years. By the way, they are now called young people. Yeah, the
Young people years.
Yeah, so I remember
Young'uns.
being a mess. Yeah, but I think that period in my life gave me really good taste in music. All the interests that I gathered during that time are still with me. Music and appreciation for art came from that pain that I was experiencing, I think.
Pain.
Yeah. Yeah, again, most of my problems were systemic. I was trying to find my place in the society, trying to fit in with my peers. Yeah, and I just felt whole world is against me or something, like nobody would get me.
That's interesting. Just to change the vector of our conversation, how many people do you think watch more than one television show at a time? Because we're doing that, aren't we? We're watching 3
Yeah.
simultaneously. We're watching Derry Girls, who we just talked about, which is
Yes.
about a lot of interesting things.
The
other one
Mindy
we're
Project.
watching is the Mindy Project, which is another really great show because it's one of those shows that I think you can just sit back and take. You don't have to. It's thoughtful, but it's not a show that necessarily makes you intellectually ponder over issues.
Exactly.
And that's a good thing sometimes, Not
Exactly.
every. I'm a firm believer in the idea that all films, all shows don't have to have a message. They just have to be.
True. And I think Mindy Kaling has done a great job. I wouldn't say there's no message there. The message is very subtle and it hits your subconscious.
Yeah. You can find it
Subconsciously,
if
if you are a body shamer or if you are somebody who is not aware of these things offending people, you would actually catch messages. She's not apologetic about the choice of her clothes or the aspirations or desires that she has. I think it goes deeper because other methods have been tried and tested, being in the face about stop this, don't do this, you need to be subtle, you need to be body positive. So I think the other way of looking at it like this is a satirical way, creating a satire about it, that she's unapologetic, these are her interests and she is going about achieving those.
Yeah, I like how you put it. If something does happen that's, let's say, questionable, the show doesn't really make a statement about it. The show also doesn't let it go. It addresses it very subtly, and because it's a sitcom, funnily, and then it moves on. But I think that's enough to make you recognize what just happened.
Yeah.
And then again, it's like that. It's like Derry Girls, you know. Now that I think about it, it's like real life.
Yeah.
You're generally working towards betterment. You're generally working towards recognition of differences, acceptance, whatever. But it doesn't make a statement out of it, and I think it's powerful in that same way.
I agree. I agree. And I think being more straightforward has not worked for many things. You know, of course, there was an era where you'd have to make a statement for people to even register that topic. Now that in the collective consciousness, that psyche that we speak about, these concepts are registered. Now we just need triggers and ignition. You know, small spark would do to start the conversation. If not starting a conversation, at least there's that insight. Did you think that she's not entitled for that because the way she looks? You have to rethink what you're assessing. That means you're actually biased about this. You're actually this. And that's why this took you by surprise, that she could have these many aspirations, that she could wear and dress up
Right.
like this.
So you're saying the baseline of awareness has improved. It's risen. So you don't need as much to make people recognize it in the first place. With very subtle signs, people can recognize it and then think about what they can
That is
do about
one.
it.
That is one way. But what I also mean is that people might have become desensitized to messages that are given to them in detail. They might switch off in between because they are either long or redundant or something that they are trying to fill the gaps instead of actually listening to the whole message. But when it is so subtle and indirect and implied, you actually think about it because you feel invested in it. It's like a mirror to the society, that you know.
Yeah, but you know what this reminds me of, funnily enough? The exact opposite. Because in a film like Barbie, which came out not too long ago,
Yeah,
you
that's a
have
good
the
one.
exact opposite, right? You have a bold statement that's being made loudly, openly about something. And it's one of those films that gets it right in the sense that it doesn't make a
Oh, it does.
it doesn't
Yes.
it doesn't make fun, it doesn't make a joke out of itself in its attempt to use something light-hearted to make a bold explicit statement. So I think it's just as hard to make an explicit statement as it is to make a subtle one and get it right both the times. And these are really good examples we have. On the one hand, the Mindy Show, which is really subtle about how it does things, and on the other hand, a film like Barbie, which comes less frequently, but gets it right even in its loudness. I
Yeah.
suppose yeah. But the third show that we're watching, since we mentioned it, is the X-Files,
Yes.
which is from the 90s.
Yes.
Cult
Cult classic.
Well, I've been asking you to watch it for 3 years now.
Yes.
And you never did, and then finally you got into
around,
it,
yes.
and now you're hooked.
Yes, and I just can't stop. I love every episode, and I like it how it is ahead of its time, how they thought about these concepts at that time. And of course, I do feel the character of Fox Mulder sometimes mansplaining and a little
Yeah,
patronizing. But it is
I agree with you
social
on some
context.
aspects, but there are some aspects that I disagree, because sometimes it's just the weird script. Because I get that they're making him do the explaining, but it's really, even if you were to, let's say, replace that with a woman's character, I still think there are instances in this script where it's like there's exposition in the script. They're telling the viewer what happened through one character telling another character what's happening. I think because particularly in the it's reduced now. If you we're in the second season, by the way, aren't we?
Yeah.
And it's kind of reduced now, but it was a little more in the first season because I think they were the showrunners were not really sure if people would understand, grab onto these outlandish ideas that the show
Yeah.
so frequently deals with.
Outlandish.
Yeah, but now in the second season, it's been normalized to some extent. Like you know what to expect. You're not taken aback as much, and therefore you're channeling your interests into seeing how that specific issue
Yeah.
actually plays into the story,
Yeah.
the characters.
But I think Dana Scully, played by
Gillian Anderson.
Gillian Anderson,
Yeah.
is also she's fierce, and that femininity and the way her intellectual stance on things and how she's she knows what she's thinking, and she knows where she's coming from, and she's very sure about it, and she knows what to do about things. So I think that way somehow the balance is created.
True. One of my favorite female characters, by the way. I don't know, back in the 90s, who didn't like it?
Oh my God. I think now I see her in Sex Education as that sex therapist. And I was like,
I haven't watched that show.
wow. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
That's nice.
Her acting versatility is seen. Yeah.
Her accents are great. Really spot on.
Accent?
Even
You
when she
might
goes from...
find my accents changed from minute here as well, from English that is not English, from Indian accent to
Martian.
British to to American, because I watch American shows and mostly then I live in Britain.
Yes.
So yeah,
It's just like someone took your accent and put it in a blender or something.
Yeah. That's a good metaphor.
That's unique. That's nice, actually. Being able to just juggle all of these accents, even if it's involuntary.
I don't know what I am speaking.
For those who don't get it, that means she doesn't know what she's speaking.
I don't know.
I don't really know what that means.
I don't know.
What?
Really? Really?
It's nice how in a span of, I think, 30 minutes, we were able to go from something really serious to something really, I think something even more serious to something, to making fun of the way we talk.
I think
Everything's a joke.
Yeah.
Everything is everything is a joke.
Every day nothing is bhel.
Right.
It's an Indian chart, by the way, where you mix a lot of vegetables,
You mix
and puffed
everything.
rice and
Just
chutneys.
mix everything in it. Yeah. That's what this is. It's interesting because we had so many ideas on what we should talk about if we make a podcast, and we really spoiled ourselves with choice, I think. So in the end, we have something like this, which is, I think, unique in some aspects and goes against this whole idea that you need some sort of a niche. I think there is a niche, Our niche is good conversation.
Oh.
That's our niche.
I think...
I'm having an epiphany live. So that's our niche.
Do we get to decide if the conversation is good?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it's our
Entitled.
conversation.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I really enjoyed recording this.
Yeah. I think we'll wrap it up for now, and then we'll be back.
Yep.
For our next episode.
Yes.
And what is that?
Bye.
Every 2 weeks? Every week?
Mostly every week.
Every week.
Yeah.
Every week.
Yeah.
What are we going to talk
encourage her.
about next time?
I like to talk about momos.
Momos. That's it. Okay.
Dumplings.
What are momos? You know, they're like dumplings but better. Okay, changed my mind. Well, it's been nice.
Yeah.
It's
I loved
been
it.
nice having a conversation. It's great. Let's wrap it up then.
Yep.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.